Do you believe there should be any federal laws against homosexuality, homosexual activity?
I have always opposed the constitutional amendment process for the purpose of defining marriage. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I know that this puts me at odds with some of my evangelical brethren, but I'm on record as opposing that method. I do support the Defense of Marriage Act, which was passed back in 1994, I believe it was. President Clinton signed it into law, and I do support that. Obviously, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, and I believe that the Defense of Marriage Act properly recognizes that God-ordained institution, and I support that. But as far as a constitutional amendment to put in the Constitution, a requirement of marriage between a man and a woman, I've always opposed the constitutional amendment process to do that.
Okay, well, thank you. The next question I have is, a lot of libertarians obviously supported Ron Paul, and his general view on, he's been a pro-life activist his entire career. But one of the views that libertarians share nearly unanimously is opposition to Roe versus Wade, which we consider to be, a very poor decision. But do you advocate a federal law, a national ban on abortion?
I support Ron Paul's Sanctity of Life Act. I believe that is the best way to do it. Again, I don't think the constitutional amendment is the way to handle it. It's too cumbersome, too laborious, too time-consuming, and unnecessary. I think Ron Paul has the absolute correct approach. He has introduced his Sanctity of Life Act every year for the last several years, and every year it just sits there. But I would do everything in my power as president to use the bully pulpit to coerce Congress to pass that act. The act would do basically two things. It would define an unborn child as being under the laws of the country. And secondly, it would remove from the abortion from the jurisdiction of the court under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution, which is duly the constitutional that Congress should handle things like this. This would do two things. It would immediately overturn Roe v. Wade, and it would end abortion on demand. So, yes, I support Ron Paul's Sanctity of Life Act.
Right, but if individual states were to maybe have some permissive abortion rules, as president, would you feel that that would be an issue where the federal government could get involved with the states?
I think if Ron Paul's bill passed, that would settle the matter. Roe v. Wade is overturned. Abortion on demand is no longer legal in the country.
Okay. Next question. Another issue where libertarians definitely you have some appeal to them is in your opposition to the Federal Reserve and fiat money central banking. Could you just give me a brief explanation of your opposition to the Federal Reserve and what an ideal monetary system would look like here in America?
Yeah, I do support Ron Paul's position on abolishing the Federal Reserve and the income tax and the IRS. I certainly do. I believe that is essential to a sound economy. I furthermore like the idea that if I'm President of the United States, Ron Paul's our next Secretary of Treasury. I think
that's great.
Would pretty much summarize it. But I think it's important that we return to sound money. I think that all the problems that we're facing economically are directly related to the Federal Reserve System and the fiat money supply and the way that our economics are being completely mismanaged by the feds.
Okay, well, you've mentioned Ron Paul a few times, so I wanted to just bring up an issue where I think that you have a disagreement with Ron Paul. Ron Paul, in many of his writings, has made statements of support for unilateral free trade. And the Constitution Party platform, and you in particular, seem to be in favor of some kind of government regulation, government management of trade. Would you care to speak on that?
Yeah, I don't think that my position is out of sync with Ron Paul's, to be honest with you. I think maybe some libertarians don't understand Ron Paul's position. Ron Paul, and I've spoken with him about this, He's not opposed to tariffs. He's opposed to protective tariffs.
Right.
But he's not opposed to a general tariff. And and I feel the same way. What I would do is I'd do two things. You got to do two things at once. You can't take these things in a vacuum. Number one, you're talking about removing the IRS 16th Amendment, getting rid of the penalty. You have to do some other things at the same time. What we have to do is cut spending. I would do what Newt Gingrich promised to do back in 1994, but then didn't do. I would eliminate the Department of Education, Department of Energy, etc. He said, we're going to 5 federal departments if you elect us to the House and the Senate, and we're going to reduce the cost of the federal government. Well, after the Republicans took over, we know the history. They not only did they not eliminate any departments, they increased the funding of those departments, have been increasing funding ever since, right? So, I mean, what I want to do is what he said he would do. I want to eliminate those 5 federal departments, and I want to slash the cost of the federal government. So you have to cut spending. You can't take that out of the equation, okay? So once we do that, once we cut spending, we eliminate income taxes, overturn 16th Amendment. You have to do those both. You can't have one without the other. Then the other thing you have to do, what I would favor, is a 10% across-the-board general tariff on all imports to the country. That would fund the federal government. That's constitutional because the Constitution plainly calls for duties and imposts, et cetera, as a means of financing the federal government. And that's constitutional. I support that. But it's not a protective tariff. It's a general 10% across-the-board tariff. And that's the same thing that Ron Paul calls for.
Okay, so you would not, as president, favor, for example, retaliatory tariffs or tariff rates at different tariff rates based on the country of import?
I would support an across-the-board 10% general tariff on all imports.
For the purpose of raising revenue and replacing the income tax?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Next question I have is, what should be the goal of an American immigration policy? Should it be strictly a national security matter, or are there cultural and economic objectives? How does the government know how many immigrants are the right number of immigrants to let in?
Well, first of all, we're the most generous nation in the world when it comes to immigration. We allow more legal immigrants into our country than all the rest of the world's countries combined. Over 1 million immigrants a year migrate to this country lawfully, including my chief of staff, who came from Zimbabwe, Africa, and who is now an adult citizen of our country. So I certainly support the immigration process, and it's a very generous one, and it's a very fair one. The problem that we're facing right now is a national security issue. We have open borders at both ends of our country, north and south. In fact, the north end may be more problematic than the southern end. But both borders are wide open. This is, in my view, a national security issue. In this day and time, it is absolutely ludicrous that we would not secure our borders. And as President of the United States, in 30 days, those borders are secure.
Okay, so would you say it's strictly a national security issue, or are there some objectives, for example, protecting American jobs, or maybe protecting the English majority speaking population? Would you, so in other words, if you could be sure to stop the intrusion of criminals and terrorists, etc., would you be open to letting all peaceable immigrants who come here to work, would you allow them to come in, or would you set some kind of number as to how many could come in?
Well, I think when you say all, in other words, I'm not sure I understand the question. I believe that you have to have a lawful process to allow immigrants, if they're permanent immigrants that we're talking about, if you're talking about people that are going to be in the country permanently and become citizens in our country, and I assume that's what you're referring to. If you're referring to that, then you have to have some kind of a process by which you can assimilate your immigrants into our society and into our culture. I mean, it's crazy to think that you can just bring in everybody, unlimited numbers of people, without some kind of a process in place that it's done, A, lawfully, and B, that the immigrants that are coming here are properly assimilated into our country. So I think both those things have to be in place, and there has to be law. That's what I support.